the idea that people need to live within a framework of jobs and infrastructure and amenities. What cities will be desirable over the next short period of time? Welcome to the Urban Property Investor. I'm your host, Sam Saggers, here to help you crack the code of real estate wealth. Today's show, code-cracking stuff. We're going to dig into desire lines. We're going to talk about what people want to buy. We're going to talk about why that matters. So it should be a riveting show. But of course, welcome back, regulars. You know the drill. Play the program in double speed. Get your life back. And of course, all the episodes I've done are lessons on real estate, so feel free to go back in time. But hey, I'm wearing my little Norfolkian hat. Yes, I found a hat by the Norfolkians when I was holidaying in Norfolk. The other thing that happened when I was holidaying with Norfolkians is I wrote a book. And yes, that real estate book is going to come out in the next couple of months. So I did it. I didn't think I would do it. I didn't think I could stomach writing a book again that no one's going to read. But I decided to do it. Hey, I think there's a minority of people that can still absorb reading. Of course, social media has kind of killed everyone's brain power, hasn't it? Most people can't go more than 5 minutes without getting fidgety and looking on TikTok, me included. So I don't even think I'll read my own book. But maybe you will. I've decided also to create it into an audio book for all of us who have the brain, capacity of a field mouse, which we've all become. But hey, I think the book will be good. Today's show is going to be good. We're going to go into desire lines. I love talking about desire lines, whether it's through the place economy, whether it's through aggregate demand. But today I wanted just to break it down as a simple formula to kind of comprehend. Sometimes I can be too over the top with the way I explain things, but I really want to just break it down through this show today into three kind of genres. You've got basically space where people or what people want to live in. You've got places where people desire to live in. And you've also got the macro influence of cities, the idea that people need to live within a framework of jobs and infrastructure and amenities. What cities will be desirable over the next short period of time? Now, to explain desire lines in real estate, I always use my local beach. Yes, I live on a beach. I'm very lucky. At the beach, the council provides some pathways to get to the beach. They're beautiful pathways. They've got little bricks on them, and they've got little handrails and signs and do not litter signs, and don't bring your dog down here. Don't bring Raffy to the beach. And of course, I bring Raffy to the beach and I use a different pathway. I use a pathway that was made by the local community who want to take their dog to the beach. It's a little pathway of dirt, and it's basically on top of a basically garden bed. So what's happened in my community, instead of people using the government pathway, the council pathway, they've created their own pathway, which is more efficient to get to the beach, faster to get to the beach, and has no signs that you cannot bring your dog to the beach. So if you want to productively get to the beach, you don't use what the government has created, you use what the populace has created. Aggregate demand in my local suburb has said this dirty pathway is the best, fastest, most productive, most efficient way to get to the beach. The best use of people's time is to use the pathway that they have created. Now, that's a long-winded way of explaining a desire line. A desire line, particularly in real estate, is forged through three concepts: what city people want to invest in, what type of places people want to invest in, and what type of properties people will want to invest in. And of course, if more people vote to invest a certain way, in a certain place, in a certain typology of real estate, that real estate will go up in value faster than real estate whereby no one's voting for it. Real estate quite often is a bit of a trend. And if you understand what's on trend, you can do well out of property investment. So there are some trends when it comes to what people will want to live in. Really, I've spoken about this before, but I think it's an important conversation to repeat, that we're living in a period of time where two significant demographic groups are transforming the real estate marketplace. The first one is the millennial. The millennial are having children. They are mid-30s, early 40s, and they are getting jiggy with it. They're having little babies. And because they're having little babies, they're realizing that they can no longer live in their one-bedroom apartment together. And of course, because equally, a lot of millennials have budgets and are getting into the property market for the first time, they are looking for 3 and 4 bedroom dwellings. And quite often those 3 and 4 bedroom dwellings are either townhouses in middle suburban areas, or they're brand new houses in basically the outer suburbs. And so what is unfolding is really a baby boom of the outer suburbs and those middle ring suburbs where the townhouses are. And of course, if more millennials want to buy a home and build a home or start building a property, they are going to push the prices of real estate up in those areas and for that typology type. We're seeing it already. It's already started, but it's going to continue. And that desire line of capital growth coming from 3 and 4 bedroom dwellings is going to continue, particularly in some of the newer suburbs that quite often a lot of people have never heard of. And for a lot of the property investment community, this is kind of a new thing, because typically those outer suburbs were kind of the last place you would go to invest. But because of aggregate demand, they're becoming very, very, very popular. And a word of caution, you obviously need to choose the ones which are driven around lifestyle, not just cheap and cheerful. And of course, there are a lot of broken neighborhoods in our urban landscape, and they do not make great investment areas. When families think about an area, they're thinking about good amenities, great community. They're thinking about good local schools. They're thinking about transport. They're not thinking about a cheap and cheerful weird house falling down, which is basically broken to go and start a family. They're not thinking about the cheap suburb. They're thinking about the value in real estate, the lifestyle value of real estate. Now remember, real estate has two kind of value intersections, price versus lifestyle. And for the most part, though people have a budget, they're shopping on lifestyle, not just moving a family to a cheap, weird suburb where gopniks live and down the street there's an ice den. That's not highly appealing. And of course, for a lot of property investors I speak to, they're always asking me about the ice den suburb. What do you think of this icy neighborhood where every 20th home someone is a victim of domestic violence? And I say, well, there's no lifestyle value. There's price value, but no lifestyle value. What we're ultimately looking for the millennial is both lifestyle value and, of course, where we can get a half decent price. That is an affordable and livable place. And the other dwelling type, which is breaking records at the moment, without question, is the 2 and 3 bedroom apartment, particularly in a well located area. And particularly with high level of amenities. These properties are doing so well. I've had clients buy in these kind of baby boomer lock up and leave luxe apartment buildings, and they've just done so well. People have made over $1 million buying in this really undersupplied, highly desired asset type. It's without question one of the fastest growing real estate asset types in the country, and high growth, like really, really high growth. Probably arguably even higher growth than the millennial aggregate demand marketplace. Why? Because the millennial market is shopping on leverage. The basically 2 to 3 bedroom luxury apartment market is shopping with cash. And of course, that cash is driving the results of that tier 1 luxury marketplace. I do a bit of work in this space, primarily because I also help home buyers buy real estate through projects. And it's bananas. It's bananas. People are spending huge amounts on the right trophy asset, the right 2 or 3 bedroom apartment at the moment with the right building and location is doing well. You know, the beaches in Sydney, the river in Brisbane, the Gold Coast, these places where these luxury brand new apartments are being activated. Wow, they're great. And you've got to think about it as a different asset class to just a regular apartment, which is a box in a suburban area. These properties carry with them beautiful view lines. The rooftop is like Disneyland. You've got private dining. You've got swimming pools. You've got view lines which are just completely breathtaking. You've got amenity that really is lifestyles of the rich and famous in some of these buildings. You've got wellness centers. You've got whiskey bars in the building. You've got hatted restaurants at the bottom floor of the lift. And when you think about an apartment complex, you usually think of walking in, some sort of dead pot plant in the corner where the lift is, a dysfunctional, noisy lift coming down, rattling. You've got people's mail sprued across the floor. That's what a lot of people think about when they think about apartments. But actually, no, there is this new genre of apartments in Australia, which are just these incredible, incredible lifestyle homes for people. And they're just, the value in them is exponential, and they're certainly making people a lot of money. Certainly got the evidence to show that one. That's certainly going well. But when it comes to desire lines as well, you've got to say, well, where will aggregate demand want to shop? And I think the first aggregate demand concept of where people will continue to do well out of real estate is the urban village, whether it's new or old. This idea of mixed use, that if we're going to work from home, if we can go out to the local shops, if we can go to get some entertainment in a suburban level, if we're going to work from home, we've got everything at our doorstep. Now you think about real estate, right? There's the first place, which is the property itself. The second place, which is the balcony or backyard. The third place is what's walkable. And what's walkable has become very, very valuable in real estate, particularly in a world where we work from home. Can you walk out and do something literally from the doorstep of your property? Now, whether it's a townhouse, house, or apartment, I think the village is going to do very well in real estate. It's going to be highly, highly desirable. Whether it's a new urban village or an old urban village, the idea of mixed use is going to continue to grow and foster demand. People are going to go, well, if I'm going to buy an apartment, I'm also going to buy a restaurant next door. I'm also going to buy a coffee shop underneath the apartment. All of a sudden, that mixed use environment becomes more valuable. Why? Because it's desirable. It's not only desirable for one person, but multiple people. When you have multiple people desire the one thing, prices go up. And that's why you see 10 people at an auction, not one person at an auction. Desire lines. Obviously, I think, and I've mentioned this before, affordable and livable suburbs, not cheap and nasty suburbs where meth labs are. Suburbs which are full of community well-being, full of infrastructure, full of independence. In our outer suburbs, even new communities, new housing estates, which are well looked after with high covenants, best in class, are going to do very, very well. Why? Because of aggregate demand of the millennial. And of course, without question, I think you're going to see an improved level of demand for green suburbs. Suburbs that have green space. Why? Because when people work from home and they're spending all day inside, they want to go for a walk in the local park. If your property is positioned next to green space or close by to green space, it's going to do well. And of course, when it comes to things like climate change and net zero policies, like these areas are going to be protected. They're going to continue to improve. They're going to continue to be highly, highly valuable. Sustainability is a real thing and it's on people's mind. And so if you've got this kind of resilience to your real estate because it's near green space, you're going to do very well. And I think what's always done well in Australian real estate is coastal suburbs. Suburbs that have beaches. They are popular. If you look at a map of Australia, you can tell where everyone wants to live. They want to live close to beaches. Whether it's a beach in a city like Sydney, whether it's a beach in a place like Melbourne, which compared to Sydney, you look at Melbourne beaches and you're like, they're very weird and different compared to Sydney, but they're beautiful for Melbourne. When Sydney people go to Melbourne, we think the beaches are where you walk your dog. But no, they're where people go. They're beautiful beaches to Melbourne people. And I think sometimes Melbourne beaches are very underrated when it comes to how people talk about them. They've got some great beaches. It's a city built on a beach coastline, well, bayline, I guess you would say. But again, some good value in that coastal allure. And of course, whether it's the central coast of Sydney and the beaches there, whether it's the beautiful surf coast of Geelong, whether it's the Melbourne bayline areas and the beaches there or the coastline there, whether it's the Gold Coast, whether it's the Sunshine Coast, the coastal allure is going to continue to be very, very popular. And again, for a lot of people, they're priced out of absolute beach suburbs. Now, I live in on the beach, basically in Sydney, and it's very pricey. It's tier one. For a lot of investors, it's not going to happen. But can you go 5 suburbs back, which would be 15 minutes in the car, and buy real estate at a much more affordable rate? You absolutely can. Do you get the benefits of the beach with a 15-minute drive? Yes, you do. So again, aggregate demand is going to position itself around these coastal kind of blue water, blue zone effects. And the blue space effect is going to be very, very, very critical to real estate moving forward. And aggregate demand will speak, whether it's the Central Coast, whether it's Geelong, aggregate demand will position itself around the coastline. And again, you put 2 and 2 together. Do I get a 3 and 4 bedroom home where aggregate demand's going near a coastline? For millennials, if it's affordable, you're going to get capital growth. That's the reality of it. That is the reality of it. That's how aggregate demand works, desire lines. And think about real estate, it's either driven from price or lifestyle. And I always think lifestyle before price. And you're going to do very, very well out of real estate, because at the end of the day, that's how people end up paying more for real estate, and you start seeing certain suburbs worth gazillions. Think about Point Piper in Sydney. A house is $100 million. Why? Because Point Piper has a huge amount of natural amenity around it. It looks at the Harbour Bridge. It looks at the Sydney Harbour. It's got little bays like Rose Bay out the back of it. It's beautiful. It's 10 minutes to a surf beach being Bondi. So all of a sudden, lifestyle is a critical piece of the puzzle. And again, this is where wellness suburbs or suburbs that really have this high livability score are going to do really, really well, because people are going to want to invest in them. Now, Manly, where I live, gets like a 5 out of 5 wellness score when it comes to its livability. It's people are waking up jogging, they're running around. You go down there at 5 a.m, there's people doing a yoga class, there's people playing volleyball, there's beach tennis, there's surfers. It's all about wellness as a suburb. Those suburbs are draw cards, whether it's Avalon in Sydney, whether it's Torquay in Victoria, whether it's Brighton in Melbourne, whether it's Palm Beach in the Gold Coast, whether it's Mooloolaba on the Sunshine Coast. They're just great places. And again, you get this wellness effect that a community of high aspirational people want to live in these places. But buildings offer this as well now. And this is where you can see from a typology point of view, the right 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, even 1 bedroom apartment in the right building that offers wellness. You wake up and you live well. You can do very, very well out of the real estate. So again, these places are going to be the draw card for aggregate demand. Now, you've probably all heard of Manly, and that's why I'm using it as an example. But there are other places that you've probably never heard of that are kind of the next hotspot, the next Manly effect, the next Byron Bay effect. Really, that's one of the keys to finding real estate gold, is finding these little gems, hidden gems, where aggregate demand will want to live, where aggregate demand is going, where the millennial is going. And in some respects, you're seeing a lot of that in the northern suburbs of Perth. For a lot of diehard Perth people, they're like, why would you go to those northern suburbs? They're so far away. But again, you're got to understand that the millennial is having a baby, the work from home culture, the beach lifestyle, all of these things are wrapping around that kind of context. Are there better places to invest? Maybe. But again, it's about what the populace is thinking and the future behind that stuff. Now, of course, we can break down what cities to invest in. Now, I've given a few hints. I think feeder cities are going to do very, very well. Now, again, if you want to understand how I think about cities, I think about cities based on a ranking. There are global cities like Melbourne and Sydney, New World cities like Brisbane and Perth. Then there are primate cities like Canberra, Adelaide, Hobart. Then there are feeder cities that feed into some big places. So a feeder city for Melbourne is Geelong. It's 75 k's away. It feeds into the economics of Melbourne. A feeder city to Brisbane is the Gold Coast, the Sunshine Coast, Toowoomba. Feeds into the economics of Brisbane. People might work in Brisbane but live in the Gold Coast. Then you've got smaller towns or smaller cities. They're little satellite places. You've got you've got Townsville. Now, Townsville's a nice place, but it doesn't feed into a major city. It's basically in its own territory. You've got places like Dubbo. They're out in their own world. You've got little villages, which also can quite often be cut off from where aggregate demand is. And I think with property investment, one of the best ways to shore up safety for the future is where will aggregate demand live 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And we know they're going to live in your Sydneys, your Brisbanes, your Perths, your Melbournes. And I think from a major city perspective, whether it's global or New World, Brisbane's going to do really, really well because of the Olympic Games. It's going to continue to be renovated and improved. And it's going to continue to be a draw card for people chasing that lifestyle and job security of the Brisbane marketplace. As such, the feeder cities of the places like the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast and Toowoomba are going to do very well. Then you've got a place like Sydney. Again, for a lot of people, they're priced out of Sydney, so that sort of Central Coast, Newcastle precinct is going to do well. Sydney will do well. Again, aggregate demand will vote, and where aggregate demand goes, you get a price rise correlation. Melbourne's going to do well, and Melbourne will probably do well again from not only from its basically local community buying real estate. I think when sentiment improves, perhaps off the back of one rate cut, it may not be about the economics of the rate cut, just the sentiment of the rate cut. A place like Melbourne will start to rebound. But Perth and Melbourne are very interesting from an investment perspective via aggregate demand, because both marketplaces are arguably underpriced. And aggregate demand chose Perth before they chose Melbourne. And really what you've seen is a lot of people who want to invest can't buy their own home, perhaps. The rent investor community, if you like, has gone, well, where can I make some money out of real estate? And they've gone to Perth, and sure enough, you've seen capital growth off the back of real estate. In fact, I put out a Perth investor podcast, basically podcast a couple of years ago. Hey, I'm just flagging, Perth's about to go. And sure enough, Perth went. Why? Because of aggregate demand. And if you actually track when real estate started to grow in Perth and you look at the podcast date, you can see a correlation of the information I gave out to everyone that the Perth market was about to boom. So it's gone up in value. Aggregate demand still sees Perth as an undervalued marketplace. But in the last property cycle that affected Perth, what happened, it went on a 3 to 4 year run of capital growth. People made a lot of money, me included. And then they migrated out of Perth, or migrated a lot of their equity from Perth into Melbourne. And it's quite interesting that this property cycle, the two are positioned to correlate once again. If you were looking for the most underpriced marketplace in Australia, you would go to Melbourne. And so what will happen for the investor community, they will start to go, where is the value, the price value? And aggregate demand will flow from everywhere into the Melbourne marketplace. And probably from an investment warning, I would suggest the Melbourne marketplace is going to do well once aggregate demand is finished elsewhere. That may take 1 or 2 years, but wouldn't you prefer to own real estate before the rise begins? And again, the Melbourne market, I think from a desire line perspective, from a property investment perspective, is probably the most underpriced marketplace in Australia. So again, depends like for the owner-occupier, they're looking for the 3 to 4 bedroom houses if they're millennials. They're looking for a livable community. And again, the baby boomers are looking for the 2 to 3 bedroom apartments in a nice designed apartment complex. And the investors are looking for value. So these desire lines can intersect, and that's the point of today's show. If you can follow the trends, whether it's wellness, the rise of the coastal suburbs, the suburbs next to the coastal suburbs, whether it's the affordable and livable pockets, the brand new village, the urban village, the mixed-use village, these areas are going to do very, very well from a property growth perspective. So aggregate demand will go there. They will become the desire lines. And if you want to understand how I'm investing over the next cycle, it's very much what I've talked about here today, finding those hidden gems in those places. All right, folks, that's it from me. I hope you are well. We'll talk again soon as we talk more property. Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Property Investor. To never miss an episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app or on YouTube. I would love it if you could give the show a rating and share it with your friends and family. In between episodes, you can always keep in touch with me by connecting on social media over Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Until we meet again on the next episode of the Urban Property Investor, take care and bye for now.